He is such a narcissist to the point of entertainment. The book changed my life. The book changed my life. I'm glad your mum died too, babe. 5 stars. I've never lusted over a white man the way I lusted over this white man. Sobbing my eyes out. 5 stars. Hello, everyone. For anyone who doesn't know me, which is everyone because I have 0 subscribers, I am Celine. I'm also Bookish with B on TikTok. I'm obsessed with books and I like to talk about them, so I decided to start a YouTube channel because TikTok isn't really for long form video formats, so I wanted the opportunity to continue to speak about books without worrying about condensing them into a 1.5 minute long video because people always just lose interest after that on TikTok. I don't know how to do introductions, so we're just going to get straight into it. I'm doing all of the books that I read in 2023. I know I'm late, but like it's still a book recommendation, so deal with it and get jiggy with me. I started the year reading Medusa, which I think I read subjectively at the time because I was very much in my Greek mythology bag, but I feel like if I read it now from an objective perspective, it would be a solid 3.5 to 4.2. I can't decide, but it's essentially I don't want to say villain origin story, but the origin story of Medusa and the backstory of what it is she had to go through before she became Medusa, you know, the horrifying Medusa. And I love stories like this because I love stories that humanize, you know, the lore of these evil, cruel, witchy women, blah, 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 blah. So I loved this. But again, I read it very subjectively. So I think if I read it objectively, just because of the writing style and the way the story was told, it would be a solid 3.5 to 4, not even 4.2, because she had the opportunity to do a lot more with it and give us far more detail. And I feel like she didn't do that. But I will praise the fact that she didn't glorify or give us a detailed description of the sexual assault scenes in this, because I feel like a lot of books do this and it's not necessarily relevant to the story. She lets us know it happens and that's about all we need, so props for that. I then read Juniper Thorn by Ava Reid, which, by the way, I could spend about 30 to 40 minutes speaking about this book alone, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to tell you about the book and what I rated it. This is about 3 witch sisters who live under a dictatorial, tyrannical, awful father who's just like terrifyingly obsessed with them, and Ma Lynchen, the main character, feels like she is less than her sisters and less worthy than her sisters because she hasn't actually discovered what her powers are just yet, as opposed to her 2 other sisters who have discovered their specialty and have discovered what it is that they're good at, and she's not necessarily a fan of what it is she thinks her specialty is. And these 3 sisters get the opportunity to start sneaking out into town without their father knowing, because their father normally seals the gates and keeps weird track of them. And it's the things that I could say about this book. I want to talk about the plot, but I mainly want to talk about the use of motif and metaphor in this book, and the way that cannibalism and nipple play and sexuality is used as a way of representing and discussing the trauma that Ma Lynchen specifically experiences as a person, the sexual trauma she experiences, the emotional trauma, the familial trauma, everything that she has to endure as a consequence of her father and the life she then lives because of the way her father has raised her is beautifully encapsulated in the cannibalism and the nipple play and the blood play. And that is also reflected in the relationship she then has with the love interest in the story that she meets about a quarter of the way into the book when she's sneaking out into town. And it's just such a beautiful read. I'd give it about a 4.3 stars. Then I read The Book Collectors of Daraya, which is a true story about this group of people in Damascus, Syria, who went through the rubble and the destroyed, decrepit homes during the war and found all of these books that were still intact and had been abandoned or left by their deceased owners. And they created an underground library, which was forbidden at the time, so it had very secret entrances that the soldiers and the militants couldn't find. And I don't know what else to tell you about this book other than it's a fantastic read. I would rate it 4.8 stars. I think everybody needs to read this. It's such a beautiful representation of the fact that no matter the situation, literature, reading, writing, and art as a whole will always be a form of resistance. I then read Sorry Bro, which is a sapphic Armenian novel about a woman exploring her sexuality while also trying to figure out the way that she needs to explore that within her cultural traditional home. I wasn't a fan of this book, but not for the reasons that people are going to assume. I think that the incorporation of Armenian culture was the best part of the book. That was done fantastically. I personally learned so much. My issue was with the relationship and the couple themselves for no reason other than it felt very, very rushed. It felt like they weren't given the time, the complexity, and the detail that they deserve, because they could have been a beautiful relationship. But it felt like they met and within an instant they were the ones for each other, and I'm personally just not a fan of the insta love trope. It felt like the author was very much giving us a tell not show, which for anyone who doesn't know is when an author tells you something is happening in a book rather than shows you it's happening. So an author is like, I like this person, rather than showing you that they like each other. And that is exactly what was happening for the duration of this relationship. And I just wasn't a fan of it. It wasn't selling it to me. I feel like if they just had maybe 50 more pages in this book, the author could have done so much with the relationship, and I would have devoured it in a way that I didn't when I was reading it. So I would give it 2.5 stars maybe. I then read As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow, which from the grin on my face you can tell I absolutely adored this book. The best way for me to explain this book is if you ripped open my chest with a cleaver and slowly pulled my heart out and ripped it open in front of you, licked it, spat on it and stomped on it, that is what this book is for me. But I would recommend it. As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow is about this young nurse who is taking care of her pregnant sister-in-law because her family have died and her brother is imprisoned and no one knows where he is, and they live in the town of Homs in Syria during the war. And she is a nurse who's also acting as a paramedic and everything else that you need to act in during a time of war in the hospital. And it is just such a painful, agonizing, heartbreaking tale of survival and war and love. But the beautiful thing about this book is, despite all of that, it has a glimmer of hope, which I love in stories like this, because I love when stories don't just give you dark trauma porn, because that can get dangerous with Western readers who don't actually care about the tale. But the glimmer of hope and the youthfulness of it and the tender, careful way that the author handled this book was divine, and it had me sobbing my eyes out. 5 stars. I read A Woman Is No Man, which is a dual narrative, non-linear novel about 2 women from Palestine, the mother and the daughter at different times. The story of the mother is of the mother when she was in Palestine and she was coming from Palestine for an arranged marriage that she didn't want to be a part of, and the way she was experiencing it and the way her mother-in-law treated her and the family treated her. And then the second form of the narrative is of her daughter, I think 18 years later, and the way that she is fighting to break the barriers and the cycles that her mother experienced. The book is heartbreaking. It check the trigger warnings, because there are a few trigger warnings that people would need to read, but it is a beautiful, painful read on experience as a woman in an old time cultural traditional Arab Muslim family. A Woman Is No Man. Read it. This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is a sapphic, dystopian, apocalyptic story, and it looks small, but my god, it took me a while to get, because it is dense and you need to be using your brain. One thing about me is I'm not a fan of using my brain when I read. I don't want to use my brain. I want to just la-di-da-di-da. But you have to use your brain, and I enjoyed it and I loved everything about it. And it is about these 2 soldiers who are on opposing sides of the time war, and they are soldiers of time. They're time travelers. They travel through the linearities of time and the lines and the timelines, and you have to be very careful with not warping the time frame and everything. And they leave each other teasing, flirtatious, borderline antagonizing letters that self-destruct as soon as you read them, because they can't be caught by their commanders. And for the duration of the book, you have no idea what's going on, but in the best way. It's sort of like, when your friend is telling you a story and you just do not know where the story is going for the first 40 minutes and you're so confused, and then they get to the point and you're like, oh my god, it makes sense. That was me. For the last 50 pages of that book, I think I was just sat in bed saying the word what repetitively. But I would give this book 4.8 stars, only because the 0.2, like I said, I don't like to pay attention too much, but 4.8 stars, easy, light work, read this book. I then read All the Lovers in the Night, which is a translated copy, and it is about this proofreader who sort of falls in love and forms this weird relationship with an older professor. And I wouldn't necessarily call it weird, sorry, but the book didn't do much for me. There's nothing wrong with it. The writing is stunning, but I'd give it a 2 stars just because it's one of those books that has no plot and you just read it for the sake of reading, or perhaps that's just the way I interpreted it, but plotless. So I just, it's plotless. Do you know what I mean? What can I say about it? But the writing is beautiful, so I'd give it a 2.5 stars. The Exhibitionist. Let me tell you, if you are like me and you are in part of a family that constantly has a little bit of drama and a little bit of tea, this is it. The tea was spilling. The tea was hot. It was piping. So much was going on. And honestly, my favorite part of it was everyone's least favorite character, which is the father, purely because He is such a narcissist to the point of entertainment. I enjoyed reading about him so much because I sat there and I was just like, this man is not real. This man is not experiencing life in a real way right now. How are you a real human being? This is not normal. And it was so entertaining for me. I had so much fun. The author, I have to give it to her. The author is so talented because for you to be able to incorporate narcissism in such a realistic, accurate way, and believe me, I have experienced men with this narcissism, she did it perfectly. It was so entertaining. And on top of that, there was also so much other drama going on in the family, especially the wife and her little sapphic affair. So I loved this book. I give it 4 stars. I then read The Cat Who Saved Books. Cats, books, cute, wholesome short stories. What more do you want from me? 5 stars. That's literally it. That's all I can tell you. This boy is working in a bookshop after his grandfather passed away, and a cat that speaks comes up to him and tells him, yo, like, we have issues, you need to help save books. And the boy is like, okay. And they transport themselves into weird little universes 3 different times. I'm eating it up. The Cat Who Saved Books. 5 stars. All About Love by Bell Hooks. I was seeing this everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, the bookstore. Everyone was telling me to read this book. And I kind of regret it because it made me have to self-reflect in a way that wasn't necessary. Self-reflection. Why are you making me self-aware? But I mean, like, I guess I needed it. So yes, it teaches you about loving yourself, loving other people, love in familial relationships, neglect. If you're not mentally prepared to read it, don't do it. Silk. I don't know what this book was about, but it was good. 3 stars. Open Throat, which is about a queer mountain lion going through the world of LA. A queer animal criticizing capitalism, consumerism, and the ways that humans live and work. What more could you want? 4.5 stars. I then read the Aristotle and Dante duology. I have so many thoughts about this book, and I'm going to try and condense them. Aristotle and Dante, I'll start with. 5-star book. Incredible. 2 young boys, one of which knows he is gay, one of which is in complete denial about it, slowly falling in love with each other because they're best friends, and not realizing on one end that you are in love with each other, and having to deal with it because this is written in a time when homosexuality was not acceptable. So beautiful. A quotable line on every single page, a quotable moment, an instant that really makes you feel, oh my God, I will never be loved in this way. Absolutely stunning. Everything about this book was absolutely perfect. And then the sequel came out. What was the point of that? Why does this exist? Cool, it was cute. Cool, there was still some quotable lines. This book is like twice the size of the first book, and I just don't like when books that don't need to exist. What was the purpose of it? You did this years later for the sake of saying you wrote the sequel and for the sake of cashing in a check. This book did not need to exist. The first one was top tier. This book I gave 2 stars. You could have stuck with the duology as a single book and you would have been a 5-star read, a 4-star read, a 5-star read, but you decided to add a second book and you brought the whole duology down to an average of a 3.5. I'm unhappy with you about that. Then I read part of a story that started before me, which is a poetry anthology of Black poets' poetry over the years. I think it was absolutely beautiful. A lot of the poems weren't my style of poetry that I enjoyed to read or write, but I can stand from an objective perspective and say that the poetry is skilled and it is talented and it is beautiful. So I gave this book a solid 3.8, 4.2 stars. The Once a Broken Heart trilogy. The 3rd book is in my hands right now because I have separate thoughts about that one. These books, incredible, just fantastic, divine. The flirting, the tension, the pining, the yearning was something I hadn't read in such a long time. I've never lusted over a white man the way I lusted over this white man. Jax is something else. See? But these books were fantastic. And Stephanie is such a fantastically talented writer that I actually accidentally started reading the sequel before I started reading the first book because I thought this was the first book because she writes so seamlessly. She was incorporating the events of the previous book in a way that just felt like seamless, lighthearted world building. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, she's going to elaborate on this later in the text. No, I was just stupid and picked up the second book. But this book, the second book, is the best in the series. This book is 4.8 stars. Oh, this book is 4 stars. The 3rd book, Didn't need to exist. I have never seen the TikTokification of literature like I saw the TikTokification of this book. I saw a quote that read almost word for word, he'd destroy the world and watch it burn for her. Hold your horses. I didn't realize a 12-year-old Wattpad fanfic writer was writing this novel. What happened here, Stephanie? How did you go from the literary masterpiece of these two texts to whatever the hell that was? Why did you just take everything everyone on TikTok was saying they wanted to read and put it in a book? Why would you do that? You just took the series from an average of a 4.5 rating to like a 4 rating. A 3.5 rating because of that book. That was just atrocious. I'm not even putting it on the screen. I'm not even going to put it on the screen. These next few books I don't have the physical copy for because they're either trapped somewhere in this big pile of books that I do not want to open, or they have been stolen by my friends. Anyway, I read One for My Enemy by Olivia Blake, which, for people who do not know, is my girlfriend, best friend, sister, soul sister, and kindred spirit, all in one. I was gobbling every second of this book up. This book, let me explain this book to you. Romeo and Juliet in modern times, but instead of just warring families, it's warring witch covens. And the witch coven that I am on the side of, which is the female love interest, is a matriarchal witch coven. It's just women and they run that shit. And let me tell you, I was in love with all of them. Then there's the opposing witch coven of the brothers, who are morally questionable, but like so sexy in their own way. This book was so fun to read. And not only did it give us one romance plot, it gave us two. And they both made me cry. And they both broke my heart. And they both made me realize real love would never happen to me because that is what I want. I then read Count Your Lucky Stars. I remember nothing about this book. That's how insignificant it was to me as a book. So I'm going to give it a 2.5 3-star rating. Miscommunication trope is all I'm going to say. I despise miscommunication trope, especially the way miscommunication was done in this book, because you are fully grown adults with a history. And you're telling me you were incapable of just communicating about these one or two things? Like, the book would have been 100 pages if they just communicated. You couldn't do that. The only thing I liked about this book is the flirting. The flirting was incredible. It was done fantastically. It pissed me off. I cared more about the side characters' relationships and their dynamics than I cared about the main love interest's relationship, because it was just miscommunication, man. You're fully grown adults. Speak to each other. I then read Couplets, which is a poetry anthology, sort of, kind of. It's written in the form of poetry, but it's just like a story about exploring sexuality. 3 stars. Really, really good, but 3 stars because it didn't do much for me, so I feel like it's a good middle ground. Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I read this book in my cynicism era, in my Love's Not Real era, in my Men Are Liars era, so I don't think I read it objectively, but even then I gave it 4 stars because it was a really good book. It was a really, really good book. I just was in my heartbreak era and I read it, and every time he said something kind and romantic and loving, I rolled my eyes and I was like, you're a liar! But I just needed help. Tuesdays with Morrie. My only criticism of this book is that it wasn't long enough. My only criticism of this book is that I didn't get to read it for a longer time. This book changed my life, honestly. It changed my life. It is based on a true story about this man who's watching the news and sees his old university professor, who was also his favorite teacher, on the news, basically stating that he is going to die. Like, he finds out that his old professor is going to die and he goes to visit him on a Tuesday, and they have a talk and a catch up, and him and his professor come up with a deal where the main character will visit Morrie, his professor, every Tuesday for a final module, which is a course on life. And every Tuesday is new lessons. It's a lesson on how to deal with love, a lesson on being content with life, a lesson on not working as much, a lesson on finding peace with the existence of the world. And let me say, very Muslim coded. Every time Morrie spoke, I was like, brother, you're a Muslim man. Welcome to the club. But it was it really opened my eyes and my heart to the fact that there is so much to life that we are not letting ourselves experience because we are so obsessed with getting caught up on the little things and getting caught up on things that don't matter, that we are purposefully, but also unknowingly, shielding ourselves from the beauty of a life that we could experience. The book changed my life. The book changed my life. 5 stars. I'm glad my mum died. What a book. I listened to this as an audiobook and I listened to it in a day while I was at work. I'm sat on my desk in my little corporate office listening to this book, trying not to sob my eyes out. Oh my God, the way she talks about her eating disorder, it hit a bit too close to home, but in the best way possible. It was seamless. It was incredible. It wasn't glorified. It wasn't romanticized. The way she talks about her relationships and her sexual experiences and the way that she's grown up in life in a hindered way because of the way that her mother treated her and the way she hated but loved her mother and the way that wasn't awful. Honestly, like, R.I.P. to everyone who dies. Don't speak ill of the dead. But like, what a horrible person. What a horrible person. I'm glad your mum died too, babe. 5 stars. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Let me tell you from now, this review's not going to be objective because I've been a die-hard Hunger Games fan from the day the first book was published. In our technology classes at school, we were making bookends. What were mine? Mine was the Hunger Games logo, the Mockingjay. This review is not objective whatsoever. This book, 8 and left no crumbs. 5 stars. Everything that was happening in here, the way that she explores themes of war, just fascinating. The way that she explores the subject of collective punishment, bombing hospitals, just all of these war crimes, and the way that children specifically and civilians are the biggest victims of stuff like this, and the way that they speak about it out there. Fantastic job. You did amazingly, especially because giving me that insight into Coriolanus's brain. Like, yeah, he's sexy, but like, that is not okay up here. And that's normally fine in most situations, but not in this one. Not in war criminal situations. Anyway, that is all of the books I read in 2023. Thank you for watching, and come back for the next video if anyone watched this video. Love you, bye.